I stood at the back of Riverside Funeral Home, watching 200 people mourn my death. My father stood at the podium, reading an obituary about a beloved son who died tragically overseas. My mother dabbed her eyes with a silk handkerchief. My younger brother sat in the front row wearing our grandfather's watch, the one that was supposed to be mine. The obituary was filled with lies. The tears were fake. The grief was performance. I adjusted my tie, checked my phone one last time, and started walking down the center aisle. Every step brought me closer to their shocked faces, closer to the truth they tried to bury, closer to the justice I spent 5 years fighting for. 5 years earlier, I was a different man. My name is Cody Morrison, and at 32 years old, I had everything a person could want. I worked as senior architect at Morrison Construction Group, the prestigious firm my grandfather founded 60 years ago. My office overlooked downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows that let in the morning sun. My desk held models of buildings I designed, structures that changed the skyline of our city. I was engaged to Amanda, my college sweetheart. We met at the University of Washington, fell in love over late-night study sessions and weekend hikes in the Cascades. She had blonde hair that caught the light, green eyes that sparkled when she laughed, and a smile that made me believe in forever. Our wedding was planned for the following spring. We had already picked out invitations, booked the venue at the Harbor Club, and started looking at houses in the suburbs. My family was everything to me then. My father, Gerald Morrison, ran the company with an iron fist and a strategic mind. He was 60 years old, silver-haired, always in custom suits, always commanding respect when he entered a room. My mother, Patricia, was the social architect of our family. She organized charity galas, sat on museum boards, and made sure the Morrison name remained golden in our city's elite circles. Then there was Ethan, my younger brother, 29 years old, charming in that effortless way some people have, with our father's build and our mother's sharp cheekbones. He worked in operations at the company, handling contracts and client relations. We were close, or so I thought. We played golf together on Sundays, grabbed beers after work, talked about growing the business our grandfather built. That Friday in October changed everything. I had just closed the biggest deal in company history. $75 million for a municipal contract to design the new Civic Center. 2 years of relationship building, countless presentations to city council members, late nights refining proposals. The contract signing happened at 3 p.m. The mayor shook my hand, cameras flashed, and I felt the pride of carrying on my grandfather's legacy. We celebrated that night at Steakhouse 21, the place where our family marked every major milestone. Gerald ordered bottles of wine that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He stood up, raised his glass, and made a speech about legacy, about family, about building something that lasts beyond our lifetimes. I remember feeling so secure in my place, so certain of my future. Monday morning destroyed that certainty forever. I arrived at the office at 7:30, like always. My assistant, Jennifer, looked pale when I walked past her desk. She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it. I found out why 30 seconds later. 2 police officers waited inside my office. Detective Sarah Chen and Detective Mike Torres. Behind them stood my father, my mother, and Ethan. Amanda was there too, sitting in one of my client chairs, her face red and puffy from crying. The detective spoke first. They were investigating embezzlement at Morrison Construction Group. $300,000 had been transferred from company accounts to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The account was in my name. They had transfer authorizations with my digital signature. They had access logs, showing the transfers originated from my computer. They had emails I supposedly sent to shell corporations. I stood there, frozen, unable to process what I was hearing. My brain felt like it was moving through mud. This could not be real. This could not be happening. Ethan had discovered the discrepancy while reviewing quarterly financial reports. He brought it to our father. Gerald hired a forensic accountant who traced everything back to me. They confronted Amanda, who checked my laptop at our apartment. She found encrypted files, transaction records, evidence of planning that went back 6 months. I tried to speak. I tried to tell them this was insane, that I never touched that money, that someone set me up, but my father's face stopped me cold. He looked at me like I was a stranger, like I was something dirty he needed to scrape off his shoe. The officers asked me to come downtown for questioning. I said I wanted to call my lawyer. Detective Chen said that was my right, but the evidence was pretty clear. They could do this easy or hard. Gerald finally spoke. His voice was ice. He said I had destroyed everything our family worked for. He said I had betrayed the trust our grandfather placed in us. He said I was a disgrace. I looked at Amanda. She would not meet my eyes. Her hands twisted in her lap, and fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. I begged her to tell them this was crazy, that she knew me, that I would never do this. She whispered that she wanted to believe me. But she had seen the files. She had seen the evidence. She did not know who I was anymore. Ethan stood against the wall, silent. I caught his eye for just a second. Something flickered there. Something I could not name. Then it was gone. The officers handcuffed me. Actual metal handcuffs, cold against my wrists. They led me out through the office floor. Every employee stopped working. Phones came out. People filmed me being arrested. Whispers followed me like ghosts. As we reached the elevator, I heard my father's voice one last time. He said I was no longer his son. He said I had destroyed everything our grandfather built. He said I was finished. The elevator doors closed on the life I knew. When they opened again on the ground floor, I was something else entirely. A suspect, a criminal, a man who lost everything in the space of 20 minutes. My college roommate Jake posted my bail. $100,000, which he somehow scraped together by taking out a loan against his house. Jake Carter had been my best friend since freshman year at the university. He was a software engineer, married to his high school sweetheart Rachel, with 2 kids under 5. He believed me when no one else did. I hired Marcus Webb, a criminal defense attorney with 23 years of experience. His office smelled like old books and coffee. He wore glasses that constantly slid down his nose, and he had this habit of clicking his pen while he thought. Marcus reviewed all the evidence the prosecution planned to use against me. He sat back in his chair after 3 hours of reading. He clicked his pen 17 times. Then he said the case against me was surprisingly strong. Someone with deep inside knowledge had constructed this frame perfectly. Digital fingerprints, access logs, transfer authorizations with my credentials. Everything pointed to me. The trial date was set for 4 months away, early February. My personal life collapsed faster than my legal defense could be built. Amanda broke off our engagement the day after my arrest. She came to Jake's apartment where I was staying. She still wore the engagement ring I gave her. $10,000 for a 2-carat diamond that caught the light like captured stars. She said she could not marry someone she did not trust. She said the evidence was too overwhelming. She said she needed to protect herself. I asked her to please believe in me, to remember who I was, to stand by me while I proved my innocence. She took off the ring, placed it on Jake's coffee table, and left. Later I found out she kept it anyway. Claimed I owed her for emotional damages, for the wedding deposits we lost, for the pain I caused her. My lawyer said fighting her over a ring was the least of my problems. 3 days after my arrest, my parents summoned me to their estate. The house where I grew up sat on 5 acres in the expensive part of town, with manicured gardens and a circular driveway. I had not been back since the arrest. Walking through the front door felt like entering enemy territory. Gerald sat behind the mahogany desk in his study. The same desk where he taught me chess when I was 8. The same desk where he handed me my first company paycheck at 16. Patricia stood by the window overlooking the garden, her back rigid, her arms crossed. Ethan slouched in the leather chair in the corner, wearing grandfather's watch. I noticed it because that watch was supposed to come to me as the eldest grandson. Gerald did not waste time. He slid a folder across the desk. Legal documents removing me from the company effective immediately. My shares in Morrison Construction Group, 30% ownership worth approximately $8 million, were being forfeited under the morality clause in the shareholder agreement. Conviction of financial crimes voided my stake. But I had not been convicted yet. I said that. Gerald said the board voted unanimously. The company could not be associated with someone under investigation for embezzlement. My name on the letterhead was poison now. The family trust fund my grandfather established was also being contested. $2 million set aside for me since birth, meant to be mine at 35. The family attorney was filing to freeze and reallocate those assets based on moral turpitude. Gerald said grandfather would never have wanted a thief to benefit from his legacy. I tried to defend myself. I brought up inconsistencies in the timeline. The offshore account was opened on a Tuesday in March. I was in Seattle that entire week for a conference. I had plane tickets, hotel receipts, meeting notes with dozens of witnesses. How could I have opened an account in person when I was 800 miles away? Gerald said the account was opened online. The IP address traced to my home computer. Patricia finally turned from the window. Her voice was cold when she asked how I could do this to them. After everything they gave me. After all the opportunities, the education, the position in the company, how could I betray them like this? I looked at Ethan. He was fiddling with the watch, spinning it around his wrist. When he noticed me looking, he smiled slightly. Just a tiny upturn of his mouth, there, and gone. I felt ice in my stomach. Gerald told me to leave. He said I was no longer part of this family. He said my name would be removed from everything. He said I was not welcome in their home, at family events, anywhere in their lives. Patricia nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. Ethan said nothing, just kept playing with that watch. I left. What else could I do? I got in my car, except it was not my car anymore. The BMW was company-owned. They repossessed it the next day. I took the bus back to Jake's apartment. The next week brought more devastation. Legal papers arrived. My family was suing me in civil court for damages. $300,000 for the embezzled funds, plus $5 million for reputational harm to the Morrison name and business interests. They were using their connections to freeze all my bank accounts pending investigation. I had $1,700 in cash and nothing else. My country club membership was revoked. My professional association memberships were suspended pending the outcome of the trial. Friends from college and work stopped returning my calls. People I had known for years crossed the street to avoid me. My social media filled with cruel comments and speculation. Only Jake remained loyal. He gave me his couch, bought groceries, and drove me to meetings with Marcus. Rachel, his wife, was kind but cautious. I saw the worry in her eyes. I was a convicted felon in waiting, crashing in their home with 2 small children. 10 days after the civil suit was filed, I was scrolling through social media late at night. I could not sleep anymore. My mind ran in circles, trying to find a way out of this nightmare. I clicked on Amanda's profile. She had posted new photos, engagement photos. With Ethan. The pictures were professional. Beach sunset, her in a flowing white dress, him in linen pants and a rolled-sleeve shirt. They looked comfortable together, intimate. The kind of photos that come from a relationship that has existed for months, maybe longer. The post was dated 1 week after she broke up with me. I checked the metadata. The photos were taken 3 weeks earlier, 2 weeks before my arrest. The truth hit me like a physical blow. This was planned, all of it. Amanda and Ethan had been together long before my arrest. The engagement, her access to my laptop, her testimony about finding evidence, everything was coordinated. I realized with horrible clarity that I had been set up by the 2 people I trusted most in the world outside my parents. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. Jake found me there 20 minutes later, sitting on the floor, shaking. I showed him the photos. He swore and punched the wall. Rachel made tea and said we would figure this out, but her voice was hollow. We all knew the truth. I was being destroyed systematically, and I had no idea how to fight back. Marcus worked 80-hour weeks trying to build my defense. But every lead turned into a dead end. Every piece of evidence that might clear me had a counterpoint that made me look guilty. The prosecution's case was a masterpiece of fabrication. I tried to investigate on my own. The offshore account had been opened on March 14th. I was in Seattle from March 13th through March 17th for the Pacific Northwest Architecture Conference. I had physical proof. Airline tickets on Alaska Airlines, Flight 307. Hotel receipts from the Fairmont Olympic. Meeting notes from panels I participated in. Dozens of people who could confirm I was there. I brought this to Marcus excitedly. Finally, proof I could not have done what they accused me of. He listened, then pulled up the forensic report. The account was opened online. The IP address traced to my home network in our city. Someone used my computer, in my apartment, while I was gone. Amanda lived with me. She had full access to everything. I said this to Marcus. He asked if I could prove she did it. I could not. Proving someone else used my computer versus me using it remotely was impossible. The prosecution would argue I set it up before I left, or accessed it remotely, or any number of explanations. The trial began on February 3rd. 3 days that felt like 3 years. The courthouse was downtown, a gray stone building with marble floors and high ceilings that echoed every footstep. Press packed the gallery. The Morrison family scandal was front-page news. The prosecution presented their evidence methodically. Financial expert witnesses traced the money flow. Digital forensics experts explained how the transfers were made. Character witnesses from the company testified about my access and opportunity. Amanda took the stand and cried while explaining how she discovered gambling debts I supposedly hid from her. Complete lies, but delivered with such conviction that even I almost believed her. Former colleagues testified that I seemed stressed and secretive in the months before my arrest. Normal work pressure was reframed as consciousness of guilt. Every late night at the office became suspicious. Every closed-door meeting became a conspiracy. Marcus called his own witnesses. Jake testified to my character. A few old friends spoke on my behalf, but we had no physical evidence to counter theirs. We had my word against a mountain of fabricated proof. I took the stand on the second day. I told my truth. I explained that I never touched that money, never opened that account, never betrayed my family or my company. The prosecutor cross-examined me for 4 hours. She made me look defensive, evasive, desperate. She painted me as a privileged son who wanted more, who thought he could steal and get away with it because of his name. Gerald, Patricia, and Ethan sat in the front row of the gallery every single day. They wore dark colors. They looked like victims. Local news covered it as a tragedy, a prominent family betrayed by a trusted son. No one questioned their version of events. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the forewoman stood and read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. Wire fraud, embezzlement, falsifying financial documents. I heard the words, but they did not feel real. My lawyer put his hand on my shoulder. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later. I sat in county jail for those 2 weeks. Jake could not afford another bail payment. I shared a cell with a guy named Tommy, who was in for check fraud. He taught me how to make instant ramen taste better using commissary chips. He said I looked too clean for prison, that I needed to toughen up. On the 4th day, a guard said I had a visitor. I walked into the visiting room and found my father sitting on the other side of the plexiglass divider. Gerald looked older. Lines around his eyes I had not noticed before. Gray stubble on his usually clean-shaven jaw. He picked up the phone. I picked up mine. He said he had a proposition. He could use his influence to get me a suspended sentence with probation instead of prison time. 5 to 7 years in federal prison was what I was facing. But he knew the judge, knew the prosecutor, had connections that could change my fate. I asked why he would do that. He said that, despite everything, I was still his son. He could not watch me go to prison. It would kill my mother. It would destroy what was left of our family name. But there was a condition. I had to leave. Not just the city, the state. I had to disappear, never come back, never contact them again. I would be dead to the family. The civil suit would be dropped. My criminal record would be sealed after probation, but I could never return. I asked why. If he really believed I was guilty, why offer this? He looked away. He said some things were more complicated than guilty or innocent. He said sometimes families had to make hard choices. He said this was the best he could offer. I looked at his face through the scratched plexiglass, and I saw something I could not quite identify. Guilt, maybe. Or fear. I realized in that moment that he knew. Maybe not the details, but he knew something was wrong. He suspected Ethan, but he was choosing Ethan anyway. Blood over truth. That was his choice. I accepted. What else could I do? 7 years in federal prison or exile? I chose exile. The sentencing hearing was brief. The judge, the Honorable Richard Brennan, looked at me over his reading glasses and talked about betrayal of trust. Then he offered the deal. 5 years probation. I had to leave the state and have no contact with the victims, meaning my family. All my assets remained seized. I had to pay restitution of $50,000 per year for 6 years. $300,000 total. I accepted. I signed the papers. Marcus looked confused by the light sentence but did not question it. The prosecutor looked annoyed, but went along. Jake helped me pack 2 suitcases, everything I owned in the world. He gave me $800 in cash, all he could spare. He drove me to the Greyhound station. We sat in his car for 20 minutes before the bus arrived, not talking, just existing in the last moments of my old life. He asked where I would go. I said Portland, Oregon. Far enough away, big enough to disappear in. He made me promise to stay in touch. I promised, knowing I probably would not. I could not drag him deeper into my disaster. I boarded the bus. Found a seat near the back. As we pulled out of the station, I took one last look at the city where I was born, where I grew up, where I built a life that was now ash. My phone buzzed, a notification from social media. Ethan had posted photos, wedding photos. Him and Amanda, both glowing, both beautiful. They were married at the Harbor Club, the venue Amanda and I had booked. The caption read, "Building our future together in the family business." I turned off my phone. I did not turn it back on for 6 months. Portland, Oregon welcomed me with rain. It rained for 37 days straight after I arrived. I took it as a sign. The world was washing away who I used to be. I found a room in a house shared by 3 other guys in the Lentz neighborhood. $250 a month for a space barely bigger than a closet. My roommates were construction workers who left before dawn and came home covered in dust. We barely spoke. I worked under the table doing day labor. I stood outside Home Depot at 6 in the morning with 30 other men, hoping someone would pick me for a job. Drywall installation, landscaping, demolition work. Cash at the end of the day, no questions asked. My architect degree was worthless with a criminal record. I sent money orders for my restitution payments every month. $50,000 a year meant I needed to make $4,167 monthly just for that, plus living expenses. I worked 60 to 70 hours a week. My hands developed calluses. My shoulders ached constantly. I lost 30 pounds in the first 6 months. I grew a beard because I could not afford razors. I wore thrift store clothes. I cut my own hair with kitchen scissors. When I caught my reflection in store windows, I did not recognize myself. I started using my middle name, James. Cody Morrison was dead, buried under lies and legal papers. James was just another guy struggling to get by, invisible in a city of invisible people. The only person I stayed in contact with was Jake, through encrypted emails every few months. He sent updates I did not ask for. The company was doing well. Ethan was rising through the ranks. Amanda left him after 8 months, took a huge settlement, moved to California. Gerald had a minor heart attack but recovered. Patricia was CEO now. The family name was being rebuilt. I read these updates in public libraries and felt nothing. That life was a story about someone else. The work destroyed men around me. I saw guys in their 40s who looked 60, backs permanently bent, hands twisted from years of hard labor. I was 33 years old and terrified I was looking at my future. After 18 months, something changed. I sketched in notebooks at night, my only connection to who I used to be. Building designs, structural concepts, architectural dreams on paper that would never be real. I drew at job sites during lunch breaks. A foreman named Roy Callahan noticed. He was 55, built like a bulldog, with a red face and white hair. He ran a small renovation company, mostly residential work. He looked through my notebook one day without asking. Then he asked if I wanted real work. I started doing project planning and design for Roy's jobs. Still under the table. Still cash. But better money. And I was using my brain again. Roy did not ask questions about my past. He cared about results. I moved to my own studio apartment in the Woodstock neighborhood. $400 a month for 300 square feet, but it was mine. I bought a used laptop. Started saving money for the first time since my arrest. Year 3 of exile. Jake sent an email that changed everything. Subject line: "You need to know. The Civic Center, The $75 million project I secured before my arrest was having problems. Structural issues. Whispers at industry conferences about corners being cut, inspections being falsified. Someone was asking questions. There might be an investigation. I read that email 17 times. The Civic Center was my design, my vision. If there were structural problems, they changed my plans. I spent 3 days searching public records online at the library. Permits, inspection reports, material specifications. Everything was available if you knew where to look. What I found made my blood run cold. Someone had systematically altered my designs after I left. Steel grades lowered. Concrete composition weakened. Foundation depth reduced. Every change saved money but compromised structural integrity. Ethan's signature was on the change orders. But there was more. The offshore account used for contractor kickbacks was different from the one I was accused of using. A second scheme, larger than the first. Millions instead of thousands. I printed everything. I filled 2 boxes with documents. I did not know what to do with them yet, but I knew they mattered. Year 4, 2 days before Thanksgiving, I got an email from an automated legal service. My probation officer had me registered in their system for court notifications. The email contained an attachment, a death certificate. Mine. Cody Gerald Morrison, deceased. Date of death, August 7th, 3 months earlier. Cause: drowning in ferry accident in British Columbia. Body lost at sea, never recovered. I sat in my apartment staring at the screen. They declared me dead, legally dead. My father had filed the death certificate with Canadian and American authorities. I searched online and found my obituary in my hometown newspaper. Beloved son who struggled with mental health issues following a difficult period in his life. Tragically lost while traveling abroad seeking peace. Survived by his loving parents Gerald and Patricia Morrison and his devoted brother Ethan Morrison, memorial service to be held at a later date. The comments section overflowed with sympathy. People saying how tragic, how sad for the family, how mental health needs more awareness. I searched deeper. Social media posts from my mother about grief and loss. My father's statement about the pain of losing a child. Ethan's tribute to his brother who was troubled but loved. They did not just exile me. They erased me completely, killed me on paper, made my existence disappear. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt something else. Clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. If I was legally dead, my probation was void. The restitution payments were no longer tracked. No one was looking for me because I no longer existed. I was free in a strange, dark way. But why? Why declare me dead? I pulled up more records. My trust fund had been redistributed to Ethan after a year of my absence. My shares in the company already forfeited were officially transferred. But there was something else. A wrongful death lawsuit. My family was suing the Canadian Ferry Company, seeking damages for my death. $10 million. They were profiting from killing me on paper. I stood in my small apartment, holding my own death certificate, and something broke inside me. Or maybe something hardened. The fog of depression that had clouded my brain for 4 years lifted. Rage burned it away, like morning sun through mist. I opened my laptop and started researching. First search: structural failures in municipal construction projects. Second search: Morrison Construction Group. Third search: Civic Center grand opening. The grand opening was scheduled for 6 months away. May 15th. A huge event. The mayor, city council, press, citizens. They would fill a building with people. A building with compromised structural integrity because Ethan cut corners to steal money. People could die. I smiled for the first time in years. Not a happy smile. A purposeful one. If they wanted me dead, I would use that. I would be a ghost. And ghosts could do things the living could not. Being legally dead offered strange advantages. No one searches for a dead man. No one questions a ghost. I used it. My savings had grown to $15,000 through Roy's work. I was careful, deliberate. I contacted Jake through a new encrypted email address. His response came 3 hours later. A single line. I thought you were dead. We set up a secure video call. Seeing his face after years made my chest tight. He had more gray in his hair, lines around his eyes. His daughter was in the background doing homework. Normal life continuing while mine stayed frozen. I told him everything. The death certificate, the obituary, the wrongful death lawsuit. He swore for 2 straight minutes. Then he asked what I needed. I needed information from inside the company, proof that Ethan framed me, evidence of the Civic Center fraud. Jake still had connections in the architecture and construction community. He could ask questions without raising suspicion. He was hesitant. He had a family to protect. I understood. I told him to forget it. But he shook his head. He said he was in. Some things mattered more than safety. Over the next 4 months, Jake became my eyes and ears. He reached out to former colleagues, went to industry events, bought drinks, and listened. Information trickled in. The Civic Center project was, indeed, failing. Engineers who inspected the site off the record were alarmed. The structural support was inadequate for the building's size. Materials were substandard. The whole thing was a disaster waiting to happen. But the city had invested too much to back out now. Political careers were tied to the grand opening. Jake got lunch with Susan Palmer, a project manager who still worked at Morrison Construction. After 3 glasses of wine, she opened up. Morale at the company was terrible. Patricia ran it like a dictator. Ethan was incompetent but untouchable. Susan said they all felt terrible about what happened to me, but the evidence had been so clear. Then Susan mentioned something strange. Ethan had a private server in his office. No one else had access. IT department was not allowed to service it. He claimed it was for sensitive client communications. She also told Jake about Amanda. The marriage fell apart fast. Amanda left after 8 months, but not before securing a settlement of $2 million and a house in San Diego. Susan thought Amanda knew something that gave her leverage. She got out while she could. This information was gold. A private server meant hidden records. Amanda's quick exit and large settlement suggested she had evidence worth paying for. I spent weeks cross-referencing dates. The offshore account in my name was opened on March 14th, 4 years ago. But I found old social media posts, archived before they were deleted. Amanda and Ethan at a conference together. The date stamp. September, 5 months before I was accused. They were together long before my arrest. I pulled archived photos, cached pages, digital breadcrumbs most people forget exist. The affair started at least 6 months before they framed me. Maybe longer. I found IT logs from the trial, public records. Ethan had remote access to my computer through the company network. He could have planted anything. The frame-up took months of planning, careful construction of evidence, patient execution, but I had nothing concrete. Everything I found was circumstantial. It showed motive and opportunity but not proof. I needed the private server data or someone willing to testify. Going to authorities was not an option. I was legally dead and a convicted felon. I had no credibility, no standing. Anything I brought forward would be dismissed as the ravings of a disgraced man seeking revenge. I needed a different approach. I needed to expose them publicly, undeniably. Then I saw it. Scrolling through hometown news one night in early April. A notice in the events section. Memorial service for Cody Morrison. 5-year anniversary remembrance. Riverside Funeral Home. Large public service. Family requests donations to mental health charities in lieu of flowers. 5-year anniversary. But I had only been dead on paper for 1 year. They were backdating my death to match my exile, creating a cleaner story. I read further. The service would be large. Community leaders, business associates, family friends, press would attend. The Morrisons were prominent citizens after all. This was a public relations event disguised as grief. They were using my death for publicity. For sympathy. To raise their profile while I was erased from history. My rage crystallized into cold purpose. If they wanted to hold my funeral, I would attend. A dead man, walking into his own memorial service. The ultimate proof I existed, that their lies were lies. But more than that, I would bring everything. All the evidence, all the proof of fraud. I would expose the Civic Center scheme. I would show the world who the real criminals were. I had 3 weeks to prepare. I booked a flight under a fake name, paid cash. I shaved my beard, got a proper haircut for the first time in years. I bought a suit at a department store. stood in front of the mirror, and saw Cody Morrison looking back at me. Older, harder, but still me. I recorded a video on my phone. 17 minutes laying out everything I knew. The frame-up, the timeline, the Civic Center fraud, the death certificate, all of it. I uploaded it to a secure cloud with dead man's switch instructions. If I did not log in every 72 hours, it would automatically send to the FBI, the state attorney general, and every major news outlet in the region. I also reached out to Emily Strauss, an investigative journalist known for exposing corruption. I sent her a preview of my evidence with a simple message. Come to Cody Morrison's memorial service on May 1st. Bring a camera. You will get the story of your career. She responded asking who I was. I did not answer, but I checked. She bought a plane ticket. I sent anonymous tips to the state building inspector about the Civic Center. Structural concerns, falsified inspections, contractor fraud. Enough to warrant an immediate investigation. I arranged every domino carefully, positioned everything to fall in sequence. Then I boarded a plane back to the city I left 4 years ago. The flight took 2 hours. I spent them staring out the window at clouds and thinking about grandfather. He built that company with integrity. He taught me that our name meant something, because we stood behind our work. He would be ashamed of what they did to his legacy, but maybe he would be proud of what I was about to do. I arrived 2 days before the memorial service. Stayed in a cheap motel on the east side of town, the kind where you paid cash and no one asked questions. I watched my family from a distance. Gerald looked older, his hair fully white now, his shoulders slightly stooped. Patricia looked polished and cold as ever, her face tight from what might have been surgery or might have been years of controlled rage. Ethan looked prosperous but stressed, with dark circles under his eyes. I drove past the Civic Center construction site late at night. Even in darkness, I could see the problems. Support beams that looked too thin, concrete that seemed poorly finished. I walked the perimeter, took photos and videos with my phone. The flaws were visible even to an untrained eye. To my architect's eye, they were catastrophic. The memorial service was set for 2 p.m. on Saturday. Riverside Funeral Home, the same place where they held grandfather's funeral 8 years ago. I knew the building, the layout, every entrance and exit. The morning of the service, I put on my suit, navy blue, properly fitted, white shirt, conservative tie. I looked like I was going to a business meeting, or a funeral, my own funeral. I arrived at 1:30. Cars already filled the parking lot. Mercedes, BMWs, Teslas, the wealthy and powerful coming to pay respects to a dead man who was not dead. I stood outside, watching through the tall windows. The chapel was elaborate. Flower arrangements everywhere. Probably $20,000 worth. White roses, lilies, orchids. An easel held a large photo of me from 6 years ago, before any of this started. I was smiling in that photo, happy and naive. There was no casket, obviously. Just the photo and flowers and grief performance. Guests arrived in expensive clothes with practiced sympathy. I recognized faces from my childhood. Family friends, business associates, people who knew me and believed I was dead. They hugged my parents. They shook Ethan's hand. They signed a memorial book and took seats in the pews. Emily Strauss arrived at 1:45. I recognized her from her byline photos. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, carrying a bag that probably held recording equipment. She sat in the back, observing everything. At 2 o'clock the service began. Music played. A minister I did not recognize spoke about loss and grief. Then came testimonials. Patricia went first. She spoke about losing a child, the pain no parent should endure. She cried delicately, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. She talked about my childhood, selective memories edited to support the narrative. A sensitive boy. A troubled teen. A young man who struggled with demons they could not understand. Several people from the community spoke. They told stories I barely recognized, reshaping my life to fit their comfort. Making me smaller, sadder, more convenient to mourn. Then Gerald took the podium. He spoke for 12 minutes, about a beloved son. About talent and promise wasted by mental illness and poor choices. He described my embezzlement as a cry for help they missed. He blamed himself for not seeing the signs. He tearfully recounted the pain of losing me twice, once to my crimes and again to my death. Then he announced their generous gift. In my memory, they were endowing a mental health foundation with $1 million, the Cody Morrison Foundation for Mental Health Awareness, to help other troubled young people before it was too late. The chapel erupted in applause, people standing, clapping for their generosity. My father stood at the podium, humbly accepting praise for using my death as a tax write-off and publicity stunt. I checked my phone. State building inspectors had just arrived at the Civic Center. I could see the alert from the news service I subscribed to. Emergency inspection ordered due to anonymous safety concerns. Everything was aligned, every domino in place. I opened the chapel door. It made no sound. I stepped into the back of the room. Someone near the door saw me. An older woman named Margaret, who used to bring cookies at Christmas. Her face went white. She made a small gasping sound. The gasp spread like a wave. Heads turned. People half stood, confused. Whispers rippled through the crowd. I walked down the center aisle. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor. Every eye in the room locked on me. Patricia saw me and literally staggered. She grabbed the pew for support. Gerald's face drained of color. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Ethan saw me last. He was sitting in the front row, playing with grandfather's watch. When he looked up and met my eyes, every drop of blood left his face. He looked like he might faint. I reached the front of the chapel, stood facing my family 3 feet away. The room was utterly silent, except for shocked whispers and someone crying. I spoke clearly, my voice carrying to every corner. I told them I appreciated everyone coming to my funeral. But as they could see, reports of my death had been greatly exaggerated. Chaos erupted. People standing, shouting, demanding to know what was happening. Gerald found his voice. He said my name like a question. He said I died. They were told I died in a ferry accident. I said yes, the death certificate was interesting. I found it very interesting too, especially since I filed it. I turned to address the room full of people. I told them I was sure they were confused. I offered to explain why I had been dead for a year on paper while standing here very much alive. Ethan stood up, tried to move toward the side exit. I called out to him. I told him to stay. He would want to hear this. Emily Strauss moved forward with her camera rolling. 2 state troopers entered the chapel at that moment. I had tipped them about the memorial service, suggested they might want to attend. They stood by the exits, watching. Gerald looked between me and Ethan. Understanding started to dawn on his face. Horror followed quickly. I pulled out my phone. I told the room I had a story to tell. And I had evidence. 200 pairs of eyes waited. My family's carefully constructed lies were about to crumble. Justice was about to be served. Not the way I imagined 4 years ago. Better. With Emily Strauss recording and 200 witnesses watching, I presented everything. I displayed my death certificate on my phone, held it up for people to see. I explained how it was legally filed, making me dead so I could not contest my trust fund, my company shares, anything. I pointed out the date discrepancy. They claimed 5-year anniversary, but I was only declared dead 1 year ago. I showed the forensic timeline of the offshore account. Opened on a Tuesday when I was in Seattle for a conference. I had plane tickets, hotel receipts, dozens of witnesses, but the account was opened online from my home computer. I explained how someone with access to my apartment and my laptop could have done this. Amanda lived with me. Ethan had remote access through the company network. I displayed archived social media posts showing Ethan and Amanda together months before my accusation, proving their relationship started long before I was arrested, proving premeditation. Then I showed the Civic Center evidence. Original designs versus final inspection reports. Steel grades lowered, concrete composition weakened, foundation depth reduced. Every change made the building cheaper and more dangerous. Ethan's signatures on the change orders. I explained that corners were cut to skim $3 million through contractor kickbacks. I held up my phone showing the breaking news alert. State inspectors were at the Civic Center right now conducting an emergency safety review. The grand opening scheduled for 2 weeks from now was postponed indefinitely. I told them the $300,000 I was accused of stealing was to frame me. The $3 million from the Civic Center was the real crime. And people could die because of it. Patricia tried to take control. She demanded security remove me. But the state troopers stepped forward. They said they needed to ask some questions. Ethan cracked. The pressure of 4 years, the guilt, the fear, it all broke through at once. He shouted that it was not supposed to go this far. They just needed me out of the way. He said he had to prove himself. That Gerald always loved me more. That he had to show he could run the company. Gerald stared at his youngest son with horror. He whispered, asking what Ethan had done. But Ethan kept talking, the words pouring out like poison. He said Gerald wanted him to prove himself. He said the only way to get a real chance was to remove me. He said Amanda helped because she wanted money and status more than love. He said the Civic Center cuts were necessary to make the project profitable. He said none of this was supposed to happen. I was supposed to stay gone. Patricia screamed at him to stop talking, to be quiet, to not say another word, but it was too late. The confession was recorded by Emily, witnessed by 200 people, heard by state troopers. The officers detained Ethan for questioning regarding the Civic Center fraud. More police arrived within minutes, responding to calls from the building inspectors who found evidence at the construction site. They had been examining the private server in Ethan's office based on the anonymous tip I sent. They found everything. All the communications with contractors, all the kickback arrangements, all the falsified inspection reports. Patricia and Gerald were not arrested, but were told to expect investigation for their role in declaring me dead and filing fraudulent death certificates. The wrongful death lawsuit against the ferry company was mentioned. Insurance fraud added to the growing list. The funeral dissolved into chaos. Guests left quickly, embarrassed or shocked or eager to spread gossip. The memorial flowers stood around an empty room like grave markers for lies. I gave a full statement to the authorities. Hours of deposition, showing all my evidence, explaining everything I discovered. Emily Strauss's story went live on her news website within 3 hours. Man attends his own funeral, exposes multi-million-dollar fraud. It spread across social media like wildfire. The Civic Center project was immediately shut down pending full investigation. Federal authorities got involved because it was municipal contract fraud. The building was deemed unsafe for occupancy. The mayor held a press conference expressing outrage and promising accountability. Within 48 hours, Ethan was formally charged with fraud, embezzlement, falsifying documents, and conspiracy. Evidence from his private server showed everything. How he planned the frame-up with Amanda. How they planted evidence on my computer. How he systematically altered my Civic Center designs to cut costs and pocket the difference. How he manipulated inspections and forged reports. Amanda was located in San Diego within a week. Federal marshals brought her back. She faced charges as an accessory to fraud and conspiracy. The $2 million settlement she got from Ethan was seized. She took a plea deal and testified against him, confirming every detail of how they framed me. Patricia resigned as CEO. The company entered crisis management mode. The board brought in outside consultants. Morrison Construction Group's reputation was destroyed. Contracts were canceled. Lawsuits were filed by the city and investors. Gerald was not directly involved in the crimes, but he was complicit. He filed a fraudulent death certificate. He paid to make me disappear. He chose to protect Ethan despite suspicions. Civil penalties followed. His reputation, everything he built, crumbled. The $1 million memorial foundation they announced at my funeral never existed. It was a publicity stunt. That money was frozen and redirected to me as partial restitution. My formal exoneration took 3 weeks. The court overturned my conviction completely. All charges dismissed with prejudice. My record expunged. Court orders restored my company, shares, my trust fund, everything taken from me. The civil suit against me was dismissed. The family was ordered to pay my legal fees and damages. My 30% stake in Morrison Construction was now worth about $4 million after the company's value crashed. My trust fund had grown to $2,300,000 with accrued interest, plus the $1 million from the fake foundation. I had money again. Resources, options. But I did not want the company. I wanted nothing to do with it. Gerald requested to meet me alone. We met at Riverfront Park, sitting on a bench overlooking the water, the same place where grandfather used to take us fishing as kids. He looked broken. He said he should have believed me. He said he chose wrong. He said he failed as a father and could not undo it. I said I had 5 years to think about why he chose Ethan. I told him I understood. Ethan was his blood son in a way that mattered to him, even if he never said it out loud. When it came down to choosing, he picked the son who looked like him, who carried his genes, over the truth. Gerald stared at me in shock. He started to protest, but I held up my hand. I said I was not angry anymore. Just sad. Sad for what could have been. Sad for what he threw away. He asked what I would do now. I said I would live. Actually live instead of just surviving. We sat in silence for 10 minutes. Then I stood up and left. I did not look back. I sold my shares in Morrison Construction to a competitor. Used the money to start my own architecture firm in Portland. Morrison and Associates, Ethical Design. I partnered with Roy, the foreman who gave me a chance when I was nothing. We focused on affordable housing, community projects, sustainable design. Jake became my business partner and chief operating officer. His software background combined with my architecture created something special. We built a company based on integrity, the thing my family forgot mattered. I hired people who needed second chances, guys from construction crews who wanted more, young architects struggling with student debt. We built a culture of honesty and quality. Every project we took, we did right. My story made me a minor celebrity in the architecture world. The man who came back from the dead to expose corruption. Invitations to speak at conferences. Articles in industry magazines. But I tried to keep focus on the work, not the drama. I started dating again after a year. Careful, slow. Trust did not come easy anymore. But I met Sarah, a teacher who knew nothing about architecture or scandal. She liked hiking and reading and terrible comedy movies. She made me laugh for the first time in years. We took it slow, building something real on honest foundation. I testified at Ethan's trial. Not with anger, but with facts. I explained how his choices put lives at risk. How the Civic Center could have collapsed with people inside. How greed and jealousy almost caused tragedy. Ethan received 8 years in federal prison. Amanda got 3 years and 5 years probation. Patricia and Gerald faced civil penalties but no criminal charges. Their social standing was destroyed. They sold the estate and moved to a smaller house across town. The Morrison name became associated with fraud instead of excellence. The Civic Center was demolished. A new design was commissioned from a different firm. The project cost an additional $40 million to do correctly. My name was mentioned in the press as the architect whose original design was sound before it was corrupted. I realized something during those years of rebuilding. Being declared dead freed me. Not legally, though that helped. But psychologically. When I was dead on paper, I stopped seeking their approval. I stopped defining myself by the Morrison name. I found out who Cody was without the family, without the money, without the expectations. Exile taught me resilience. Losing everything showed me what actually mattered. The injustice made me stronger, because I had to be. I learned that some families are born but better families are chosen. Jake and Roy and Sarah and the team we built. Those were my real family now. 5 years after walking into my funeral, I stood at the opening ceremony for a community center we designed in East Portland. Affordable housing on upper floors, public services on the ground level, green spaces and solar panels and accessibility. Built to last, built with integrity, built the way grandfather would have wanted. A reporter asked if I ever thought about what happened. I said every day. It made me who I was. The betrayal hurt, but surviving it taught me my own strength. She asked if I regretted fighting back. I said fighting back saved my life. Not just exposing them, but standing up for myself after years of being erased. Some people will try to bury you. The key is refusing to stay buried. I kept 3 photos on my office desk. Me and Jake at our firm opening, huge smiles, new beginning. Roy and our construction crew at our latest project completion, pride in honest work. A sunset over Portland, the city that gave me a second chance. No photos of my original family. I made peace by moving forward instead of looking back. Patricia died 3 years after my resurrection. Cancer, 6-month battle. Her attorney sent me a letter she wrote in her final weeks. She apologized, said she knew deep down that Ethan was lying. But she could not face it, could not admit her son was capable of such cruelty. So she chose comfort over truth. She chose preserving their image over justice. She destroyed me to protect a lie. She wrote that I was always the better son, always honest, that my integrity scared her because it showed how dishonest they were. She said she did not ask for forgiveness, just wanted me to know the truth. I read that letter 5 times, cried twice, then I put it in a drawer. Forgiveness was not instant. But understanding came. They were broken people who broke me. But I rebuilt myself stronger. Gerald is still alive, 71 now. We do not speak. But I heard he volunteers at a homeless shelter, trying to atone in small ways for large sins. I hope he finds whatever peace he is looking for. Ethan will be released in 3 more years. I do not know what happens then. Not my concern anymore. I built a good life, a real life. Morrison and Associates employs 43 people now. We have offices in Portland, Seattle, and Sacramento. We design buildings that serve communities, that last, that matter. Every project carries the lesson I learned the hard way. Integrity is not optional. Cutting corners kills people. Honesty is the only foundation that holds. Sometimes I think about that moment when I walked into the funeral chapel. 200 shocked faces. My family's lies crumbling in real time. The satisfaction of proving I existed, that I survived, that I won. But the real victory was not that moment. The real victory was building something good from the ashes. Taking the worst thing that ever happened to me and using it to become better. I learned that betrayal by family cuts deepest, but survival teaches you who you really are. Justice is not always immediate, but truth has a way of surfacing. Being declared dead gave me a strange gift, the freedom to truly live. Most importantly, the family you choose matters more than the family you are born into. And when the world tries to erase you, the greatest victory is not just surviving, it is thriving in spite of them. It is building a life so full of purpose and integrity that their lies become irrelevant. It is becoming the person they could never destroy, no matter how hard they tried. I am Cody Morrison. I attended my own funeral. I exposed the truth. I rebuilt my life. And I am finally, truly free. So, let me ask you something. Have you ever had to stand up against people who were supposed to protect you? Have you ever been betrayed by those you trusted most? How did you find the strength to rebuild? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might help someone else who is struggling right now. If this story moved you, if it made you think about integrity and resilience and the power of truth, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about ordinary people overcoming extraordinary injustice. And share this with someone who needs to know that no matter how buried they feel, they can rise again. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, your past does not define your future. Your courage does. Stay strong, stay honest, and never let anyone erase who you are.